I don't want it to be recorded.
No, it's a meeting. No, it's
I think it's being recorded, guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just suspect it.
Okay. Everybody have a good weekend? No. So far? Can somebody say so far?
It's still the weekend.
All right, I like it. All right, well, let's hold on to that attitude. Let's get real right now. All right, any of you have questions, feedback, comments, anything we need to discuss? Is it pertinent to this class? What would you like to say, Sam?
Carry on.
Okay, all right, well, today and probably tomorrow, and maybe the day after, we're going to be installing Gentoo.
Yeah.
Gentoo, yes. Everything we've learned, okay, configuring file systems, swap space, partitioning a disk, installing software, compiling software. Do you remember when we did all of that in last sprint?
Yeah.
Okay, all of that is going to be useful and pertinent to installing Gentoo. Okay, so what's cool about Gentoo? Most Linux systems, okay, what they do is they give you a kernel, okay, which runs on your system, and all kinds of other things that you need in order to get your system to run. For example, a device driver for a specific network card, or a device driver for a controller that is going to manage your disk drives, or an encryption algorithm that you want to add into your operating system. Okay, most kernels either compile those directly into the kernel or create them as what we refer to as modules. Okay, a module is a loadable piece of code that the operating system can use to enhance the capabilities of the operating system, enhance the capabilities of the kernel. If you boot up one of your virtual systems, okay, let's take a look at, actually didn't do this before class, so we're gonna need our Linux Mint system anyway, so let's go ahead and boot that up. Whoa, that's kind of big. Put that down to size. Okay. On our Linux Mint systems, if we execute the command lsmod, okay, here you can see a list of all of the modules that have been loaded into my kernel in order to make this system run. Okay, some of these we can probably recognize. Some of them, we don't have any hope. This one, CRC32, I recognize that. It's a cyclical redundancy check. It's an encryption code. AutoFS4. Okay, do you remember when we did the AutoFS stuff using NFS? Okay, that AutoFS is a module that takes care of and helps with the AutoFS stuff. Yeah.
There's no file.
Okay, ls is a command that lists files, right? lsmod is a command that lists modules. Okay, it's lsmod, all one word.
Okay.
There you go. Okay. Okay, so the idea behind Gentoo is most kernels are kind of pre-configured with a base set of needed things, and then they rely heavily on modules in order to add that functionality. The idea behind Gentoo is that you can create a kernel with the stuff that you want built into it directly compiled into the kernel. Okay, so basically you're building your own distribution of Linux, if you will. And we can take all of these things which are loaded as modules by a generic kernel, and we can configure them directly into a kernel. So we have something that's tuned and customized for our hardware and only for our hardware. If there's a network device driver that by default gets built into the kernel for the Linux Mint system, okay, if we don't have that adapter on our system, we don't need the driver built into the kernel, so that we can customize and tune our kernel so that it's as small as can be, okay, but it has all of the stuff that we need built into it. So there used to be some serious advantages to doing this. There have been improvements into the module routines and the way they're loaded so that the performance improvements aren't necessarily as important as they once used to be. Okay, but still, building a custom kernel is very instructive in terms of what the operating system is doing and how it works. So let's go through that process. All right, so in the assignment, if you look at the assignment installing Gentoo, it's rather short, okay? But it's got a link to a web page that is rather long. So this is the web page that it should take you to. Okay, you should get this Gentoo AMD 64 handbook. Okay, this is going to guide us through the installation process. If you look down here under installing Gentoo, under that heading here, you can see that there's a whole bunch of links. Okay, each one of these pages is going to guide us through one of the phases of installing Gentoo.
So Gentoo must be complicated.
It's no more complicated than any other version of Linux, but the way you get it, the way you do it is, okay? So basically with the process that we're going to be doing is we're going to boot off of another distribution, okay? We're going to boot off of a Linux that can run off of a CD-ROM. Do you remember when we installed Linux Mint? Okay, we got up, it got us a prompt, we got our start menu, we could do all kinds of things. But we had that CD icon on our desktop that installed Linux Mint, okay? Until we clicked on that, it didn't actually write anything to the hard drive. We were running Linux Mint directly off the CD in memory. Okay, so we're gonna do the same thing with Gentoo. We're gonna boot off of a distribution that allows us to run off the CD in memory. Okay, then we're going to create a disk drive or allocate a disk drive and then configure the disk drive, mount the disk drive temporarily in a mount point in our in-memory system, and we're going to build our own custom version of Linux on that disk. Okay, so we're still running off the Linux in memory. We're building a custom version on disk. Once we get done building that custom version, we're going to get rid of the one in memory, boot off the disk, and fingers crossed, hopefully everything's going to come back up and run for us. Okay, so full disclosure here, I ran through the process over the weekend just to make sure that everything was working, and it didn't. Okay, so I had a very interesting work weekend trying to figure out what was wrong, and there have been some changes both to the installation process listed here, as well as VMware and the the code that we need to include in the system to get it to work. So I finally got mine to boot. Okay, there's still a couple little problems that I have to work out, but I think we're going to be okay. But just full disclosure, it might not go right the first time. Okay. Okay, so first off, let's go to create a new virtual machine. Everybody has Gentoo downloaded, right? I think so.
Yeah,
Okay.
most likely.
Most likely.
That's the AMD 64.
Yep, AMD 64. So let's go create a new virtual machine. Okay, we want to do a custom system. Okay. All right, so it's really important on this process. There's a lot of stuff here, okay? Very important that we all stay together. Okay, it's going to be difficult if I get 3 or 4 steps ahead and somebody's like, hey, wait, what did you do 10 minutes ago? Okay, so if you need a minute, Okay, seriously, if you need a minute, if I'm clicking on something and I get ahead of you, stop me as soon as you're off track, okay? Please. Okay, so let's go ahead and click on next. We can accept the default here in terms of hardware compatibility. And we want to, let's click on, I will install the operating system later. Okay? All right, so we want to click on next. We want to click on the Linux. And we want a generic version of Linux. Okay, Gentoo is not listed on here.
So other Linux 5, is that what you're?
Yeah, so let's go with other Linux 5x kernel 64-bit. Okay, we good? Okay, let's click on next. Okay, for a virtual machine name. Okay, I named mine on my network diagram Fuego, so I'm going to put Fuego in here. You probably chose a different name, whatever you named your Gentoo system. Let's go ahead and put that in here. If you forgot what it is, pull up your network diagram. Okay, that works. Gentoo works. Okay, so once you've got your name in here, we can go ahead and click on next. Okay, processors. Okay, it's important here that we all do this the same. We're not going to have performance issues on this system. Okay, so select 2 processors, 1 core per processor. Okay, go ahead and click on next. We want to set this to 1 gigabyte. 1 core. 2 processors, 1 core. Memory for the virtual machine, make sure that's set to 1 gigabyte. Okay, network connection, we're going to have 1 network adapter to start off with. We want network address translation, so we can leave that set to the default. Click on next. Okay, is everybody showing up with the LSI logic here?
Yes.
Okay. SCSI, has everybody got SCSI on this one? Okay, so this is really important that we all have the same thing, okay? Because we have to compile the drivers for all of these devices into the operating system, it's very important that we remember what devices we're using here, okay? So that we can make sure we get the right stuff compiled into the operating system. Okay, so we want to create a new virtual disk. The disk size that we need to create for this is 16 gigabytes. Okay, we can split it into multiple files. This one doesn't matter. If you want single file, that's fine. Multiple files, either way will work. And finally, the disk file name, we can leave that alone. And finally, we get to our configuration. Everybody with me so far? Good. Okay, so once we get our system up to this screen, we want to click on Edit Virtual Machine Settings. We want to go back in here and we want to use an ISO for our CD drive. Okay, so click on your CD drive, click on USO file, our ISO file image, click on Browse, and browse to wherever you share your, or wherever you have your ISOs. And we want to click on Gentoo, minimal install 2021, whatever you've got for that.
Mine doesn't say Gentoo, but it's installing.
Oh, I added Gentoo to the beginning of my name.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, yours
okay.
probably
I was
just
like-
says install in 64.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got so many images. I was like, you know, I need to put that Gentoo on so I can remember what it is.
Fair enough.
Okay, everybody got that? Okay, click on OK or open, and that should be populated, and we should be good to go. Okay, so let's click on OK here. All right. Okay, so far it's been easy. We want to click on power on this virtual machine.
What was the difference between doing the ISO after what we did?
Or doing it at the beginning?
Yeah.
You know, if we clicked on, we probably could have done it at the beginning, but I wanted to go through the custom settings. Yeah, I don't know if it made any difference. Okay. Oh, I forgot on my system. So when we boot, we need to tell them we want to boot from the CD. Okay, so did you see this first message here? Press any key in the next 15 seconds, or we'll try and boot from disk. Okay, so I need to reboot. If you're in the same situation as me,
You can do Control C and it'll reopen that prompt.
Control C.
Oh.
Oh, okay. So there we go. Thank you.
What'd you type there?
I typed Control C and then enter.
Oh, just enter.
Yep. Yeah.
That did not work.
Message file.
Wait.
So.
Control C and then enter.
Just click enter.
Leave it blank.
What's that?
Just restart the gas.
No, I didn't type anything. I did Control C. There you go. Hit enter.
Yeah, if you get that issue, you have to physically restart.
There you go.
I don't know, we got pain stuff. He is very slow.
Okay. Are we here?
Restart it.
Who does not have this screen? You don't have it?
Hit enter. Yeah, if you get the loading failed after
There
doing
you go.
Control C, restart the guest.
Okay. You got this, Sam? Okay.
I love how you call me out.
I just looked at Chris and he gave me a thumbs up, so I didn't have to say anything. Okay, Giovanni? Okay, Dominic, Connor, everybody's got this? Connor, are you getting caught up? Okay. Do you need the sizes on this for the system creation?
I never got things.
You never got.
Probably because you're erasing ahead of time.
I erased it.
Okay, if you do not have a a red prompt with a blue pound sign that says live CD, raise your hand. If you don't have this on your screen, everybody's got this. Okay, so at this point, this is Gentoo. Okay, this is a generic kernel. Okay, it's just running in memory. We don't have anything on our disk, well, because we haven't defined the disk right. Okay, we haven't partitioned the disk. Okay, so this is just running in memory at this point. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to, okay, so this, we kind of skipped over this one. Okay, so let's click on this configuring the network and get into our system. Okay, so in terms of getting access to the network, okay, we first want to check and see if it automatically configured. So let's do an if config command. If config. Okay, did everybody get a network connection on your NAT network? Okay, we good to go? All right, let's try name resolution. Let's try ping google.com.
Yep.
Okay, everybody got some response back indicating that it was able to contact No? Okay, Daniel, did you get an IP address here?
No.
You didn't get an IP address for your network connection? Okay, so let's go to your tab up here at the top. Go to your tab. I've got a whole bunch of them here. Maybe I'll close some of those.
Matt's just gonna constantly talk. Share.
Okay, go to your tab, settings. Okay, make sure you've got a network adapter and that it's set to NAT.
Was it about the checkboxes connected at startup?
Is that it?
Connected at power up.
Wow. Someone's actually being like,
Can you get a real quick?
let all of these people, let's talk about this. Is turning employees who are not paid more work.
Okay, click on OK.
Into an army of
Get rid of this.
taxes.
Go ahead and reboot your system. Just click up here.
Based.
Just restrict it.
So we are no longer in March.
For Rocky, Rocky's based out of Central West. So,
Sure.
yeah,
The
that's-
breakers will occur. Proving that protection of those cases.
Oh, I thought she was getting on a,
Like one of those city hospital.
Okay, so do it if-
Well, just so.
There you go. Okay. Okay, try to ping Google, just to make sure it works.
Yep, we're good.
Okay, so,
Is that
okay, we don't need any proxies. Test the network there, we already did that. We don't need to use PPP or PPTP, manual network configuration, whatever you use that. Using DHCP, well, that's what we are using. Wireless, we're not using any wireless. Okay, so the last thing that we need to do is our route set up properly, so we're good to go. Okay, so the last thing we want to do is the interface here. Okay, we're going to need to be cutting and pasting. A number of these commands are fairly long. Okay, so we want to be able to cut and paste them between these two windows. Okay, this interface, okay, because we don't have any of the VMware tools, doesn't allow us to cut and paste between these two. So what we're going to do is, I lost it, but the very first thing that showed up on our screen is the message of the day file. Okay, the message of the day file is a file that's created on the system by the administrator. And every time, back when everybody used the command prompt, when you would log into the system at the beginning of the day, this message of the day file would show up on your screen. If the system administrator had some message that he wanted to let everybody know, system's going down at 9 p.m. for maintenance or something like that, okay, people would get that message of the day. So there's a couple things that we want to do that are listed here in the message of the day to help us get set up so that we can access this system from a real GUI interface, which is going to allow us to cut and paste. So we're going to use our Linux Mint system to be able to connect to this remotely and do cut and paste options. Okay, so the two things that we need to do is we need to execute this command right here. Okay, etsy initd sshd start. That's going to start up the SSH daemon so that we can connect remotely. And then the next thing we need to do is we need to set the password for the root user so that we can log into it remotely. So let's go ahead and do both of those things. /etsy/init.d/sshd start. Okay, and then password, root, and we need to specify the root user here. You need to specify that full command there. And then we need to put in a password for remote access. Okay, and I will warn you that Gentoo forces you to use a fairly complex password.
Really?
Like how complex?
I don't know, you try it and see. When I tried my normal password several times, it rejected it, saying your password's not strong enough.
I got the first one.
Okay, yeah, that's good if it worked. Okay, everybody got this password updated successfully message?
Not yet.
No, okay,
We've gotta
try
get good
again, get a password in there.
What's the command you used after start?
So the two commands, etsy and initd sshd start, and then password space root. Okay, they're displayed right here on the message of the day. Okay, if you need to see them in more detail, they should be right there in front of you. Okay?
I couldn't see the.
Where do we see
A password? 5 terabyte data.
Yeah.
I'm not on that screen.
What screen are you at?
I'm trying to boot, but I can't.
Oh, okay.
As a member of USA's Board of Contributors and Editor-in-Chief.
Network boot. Okay, we don't want a network boot. Go up to here, click on settings. Okay, for CD, you need to actually specify.
So this article,
So no.
basically how it's a bad idea.
Okay.
Bad idea.
Find your,
Have your boss. Bad idea for the government to try to people's bosses.
downloads.
Bullying you into getting vaccinated. And then like, why should we be okay with them?
Okay,
Seeing
the
our
person
medical
correct here is probably the one
That's
that's
not
not
normal.
at the top. That needs to be 16, the hard disk needs to be 16 gigabytes.
Yeah. Why are we controlling the government demanding companies insist on knowing sensitive medical info from their employees? Why are we okay with it? Using people's need for a job to force them to get vaccinated or tests.
Okay, so get rid of that one, and then change your memory to 1 gigabyte.
Hey, I can use
Try and read it.
I think on my computer.
Everyone want to agree this, I'm sorry.
Yes.
So you know my comment on the Gentoo.
You should probably do that.
That's my Gentoo password. I don't want to.
Really?
Oh,
So I'm going to find it.
okay. All right. So at this point, did everybody get this password updated successfully?
It says Chipotle, but
Okay. All right, so at this point, we should be able to jump over to our Linux Mint system.
We're gonna have to get. Talk about
Yes, so over here, you should do an ifconfig, because you're gonna need the IP address. Okay, everybody note the IP address for your system. The IP address here, note that, okay? So what we want to do is we want to jump over to our Linux Mint system and then SSH into our Gentoo system. So I'm going to do SSH root at and the IP address for my Gentoo system. Okay, you need to specify the username root because you're changing to a different username on the remote system. The IP address for your remote system, you should get a message about the fingerprint. Okay, you want to say yes to that. And you should ask, it should ask you for your password.
So it's the IP of our Gentoo.
This is the IP, yes. You want to do SSH root at the IP address of your Gentoo system.
Is it the first
Okay,
address
there
like
we
our
are.
supplementary live?
Yes.
Yes.
We'll get there. Sorry.
Okay.
Thank you, Jeremy. Jeremy? Shut the fuck up.
So it's fast.
Yeah, maybe you can. Maybe I want to. Where am I going now? Jeremy, did you feel uncomfortable not talking to you? I think I made him. I'm not talking to you. Okay.
You want to hear you clear?
When he was so uncomfortable, he was the lawyer involved.
Okay, does everybody have access to their Gentoo system from Linux Mint system? Okay, we've all got a GUI problem. Did somebody say they need another minute?
Si, senor.
Okay, got it?
Ding dong.
Okay.
Hey, yo. Sing that song. Cloudflare is 1.1.1.1. That's so special.
We're good? Okay. All right, let's move on then. All right, over here on the web browser, okay, we're done with this page, so I'm going to click on preparing the disks. Okay. Okay, there are a number of options that we have in terms of preparing the disks. Okay, it gives us a little bit of an introduction to block devices, partition tables, good partition table, etc. Okay, we are going to be doing this using a master boot record, okay, on the DOS boot sector for simplicity. Okay, other more modern schemes, this is kind of an older scheme. It's a little bit easier. Just to get our system up and running the first time, we're going to do it the easy way. Okay. In reality, if you were building a system that you were going to be using in a production environment, you would probably not want to use all of the configure options that we're using. Okay, but this is a little bit simpler and a little bit more straightforward. So we want to come down. This is the partitioning schemes that we want to create. Okay, we want, actually, this is not quite right. We want, well, yeah, it is if we're using ext4. So we want to create 3 partitions, SDA1, which is going to be our boot partition. Okay, we want to create that at 256 megabytes. Okay, we're going to use ext4 for our BIOS version. Okay, we want SDA2 for a swap partition, and we want SDA3 for the rest of the disk. This is going to be our root partition, our root file system. Okay, so that's how we're going to partition things, and we want to partition things with for BIOS. So if we scroll down here, we want to, what is the BIOS boot partition? Here we go. This is the configuration that we want, partitioning the disk with GPT. Nope, that's UEFI, sorry.
Lie to us?
I did it for a minute.
It'd be the next last, you're all set.
Here we go. Here we go. Okay, legacy boot. This is the one we want. Okay, so over on our system, we want to use the commands like they've got it here. So we want to do fdisk. Okay, do you remember we used fdisk for one of our partitions schemes that we did? Okay, so we want to use fdisk on SDA. Okay, if we do a P, okay, that'll print out the current partition information. Okay, this is some header information giving us an overall description of the disk. Okay, we don't have any partitions or else they would show up down here. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to create a new partition. So let's follow their instructions here. Let's do O first, which should overwrite and create a new DOS label. Okay. Now we want to create, we don't need to delete any partitions like they do because they've got a whole side of it. So we want to create the first partition, the boot partition. So we want to do N for new. Okay, we want this to be a primary partition, so we want to specify a P. The default partition number, the first partition is 1, so we're going to accept that. And we want to specify the size of the size for our partition. Yes.
So what are the letters you just, all those letters you typed in?
N.
P, P.
Here we go. I've got O here. O should clear out give it a new disk label. Okay, then N is for a new partition. P for the primary. 1 for the default, okay, which is the default, the first partition. Here for the first sector, okay, by default, it fills out the values for us. For the first sector, we can accept that default value, so just go ahead and hit enter. And then we want to specify the size. This one we want to be 256 megabytes, not gigabytes. So plus 256 is going to give us, beyond where we started here, starting here at this first partition, we're going to go 256 megabytes, however many partitions we need in order to grab that much space. Yes?
What if you did it in the wrong words?
What's that?
What if you did it in the wrong words?
Yes, sure.
Okay, you can start over again. Okay. Well, depending on where you are you right now? What problems you have?
First sector.
So you did a.
On the side.
Primary, you accepted.
My Linux is-
You did it right.
It's like you.
You didn't do the O, that's fine. First sector, just hit enter.
Sorry, Dave.
Okay, so do a plus.
Are you doing okay?
You did 256
The first red flag, that's what just told me that.
megabytes.
Yeah, no, they like.
Okay, so you hit enter on that command,
The first one being-
and it should create our first partition for us on the disk. So go ahead and hit enter. So now if we do a P command
Yo.
to print out the partition table, okay, we can see the same header information about the disk that we looked at before, but now we can see we've got one partition created on SDA1, okay, with type Linux. It tells us that the size is 256 megabytes. Okay, we all good?
Cool.
If you press P, do you get this? Okay.
Yeah, that's why I didn't say anything, because I forgot to.
Okay, so let's do a new partition. We want to create another partition. This is going to be our swap space. Okay, new. We want it to be a primary partition.
I did the plus 256. It's gonna be that range.
256.
Did you do 256 down with no spaces anywhere?
256 gigabytes.
I didn't have to put that in my work.
Did yours work properly?
256 meg.
Oh, this is actually for your first partition. So the initial, the first sector, you were starting at that sector, and now you want to do it as 256. Okay, so you specify the beginning and then the size. Okay,
256.
Hey, yo.
Yeah, so now we're on the end command. We're creating a new partition for our swap space. Okay, we're creating a new partition for our swap space. So we want to say primary again, okay, because we want this to be a primary partition. Okay, the default partition is going to come up, default number is 2, that's acceptable, so we can hit enter. Okay, then here's the first sector again. Okay, the first sector, we want to create, or the first sector, we can take the default on that, and here we want to specify how much real memory did we give our system? 1 gigabyte, okay, swap space, general rule is twice real memory. So we need to specify 2 gigabytes here. So plus 2 gigabytes, plus 2G, and enter. Okay, let's do a P command again. Okay, so we've got 2 of our partitions created, SDA1, SDA2. So let's go ahead and create our third partition. Okay, again, we want to do an N for a new partition. We want it to be a primary, so we're going to say P. Okay, we want the partition number to be partition 3. For our first sector, again, we want to accept the default. This is going to stack our partitions up right next to each other without any spaces in between. We accept the default there. Now here, because we want to use the whole rest of whatever's left over on the disk for this last partition, we can accept the default value, which is going to be the last partition number on the disk. So we can go ahead and hit enter on that. Now, if we do a P, it tells us that it made that partition at 13.7 gigabytes. Okay, now if we do a P command to print out our partition table, we should see we have 3 partitions, okay? 2 at 56 meg, 2 gig, and 13.7. We all on the same page? Okay, so all of this should be fairly familiar. We went through all of this before. The last thing we need to do is we need to set the type of the partition for partition number 2. Right now, these are set to Linux. We need this one to be Linux swap. Okay, so let's do T for partition. The number we need to specify is 2. So we want to change the type on partition 2. We hit enter. If we do a capital L, it'll give us a nice little list of those partitions. The one that we want to set is Linux swap 82. Notice we've got some alias down here. We can either type swap or 82. Both of them work. So if we type swap right here, okay, that should change that partition type to swap. If we do a P now, okay, we can see we've changed that to to a swap space. We all good? Okay. All right, last thing we need to do. Yes?
I'm just helping him get caught up.
Okay, let's take a moment and wait. Yes. That's correct.
I tried doing it. But it's setting going to an official somewhere. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
What do we do after the morning session? What do we do after the morning session? Ask this.
We're still in the F disk. Yeah, we're still in there. So we should still be in there. Yeah, you're right where we are. You can change the type of this so that it's T, editor, and you specify the partition number. Okay. 2 is the swap space, right? So 2 editor, and then you.
We don't even say like
the partition that you want.
Just don't.
Okay, so now do a P.
Just don't do it.
Okay, you guys made it up. Okay. Yeah, you bet. Okay, the last thing we need to do, yeah.
At least it would have been structured.
It's gonna be good. It's gonna be good.
Okay, so do you need space,
Also, like, there's a bunch of other stuff you have to get. There's like.
Oh, no. Okay, you're in your Rocky system now. Where are you going to Rocky?
So they decide that this costs.
You should be SSH'd into your Gentoo.
I think by then you're probably.
And then I'll sue.
Okay. Just take.
So you do SSH root.
Still
Okay,
great.
alternatively, just be typing. Just do this.
Yeah, it's gonna be, messy.
We go back on the wall.
Perfect.
Be like, I got that. On your medical records. They forgot to put it in. They should have put it in. They'd be like. Drive up, do you have the? No, they
It should just be after.
And then magically. And I was like, okay, that's crazy.
Okay, is everybody here? Command, say we printed out our partition table. We've got our 3 partitions. Very important, everybody, partition 2, SDA2 shows up as Linux swap, right?
Yep.
Okay, all right. So the last thing we need to do is we need to do a W command to write this partition table to the disk. Okay, that's going to save the information to the disk. If you look in the instructions here, saving the partition layout, W is the last command that you execute. So we're going to go ahead and hit W and we should be good to go. Okay, we've got our disk created. Okay, so up to this point, we have built in memory, we've got a running Linux system. Okay, we've accessed a disk drive and partitioned the disk drive so that we can now access the disk drive for our system. So what's the last thing we need to do in order to be able to access these partitions?
Alt F4.
What was that? Okay.
Shut down the system.
Okay, so we've created partitions. Do we have any file systems on these things yet?
No.
No. Okay, so we need to create some file systems. Okay, so creating the file systems is the next step. Okay, there's a bunch of description here about what different file systems you can use. Okay, we are going to create all of our file systems with the ext4 type. Okay. So what we need to do is we need to do a make fs dot ext4, and we need to specify where we want that file system created /dev/sba1. Okay, so this is our boot partition. We need to create a file system, an ext4 file system on our boot partition. Okay, so we can create that one. And then we need to do the same thing for partition 3, right? For our root partition. Okay, for our root partition, we're going to do the same thing. So we've created file systems for both of those partitions now. So everybody got that? Okay, everybody recognizes all these commands, right? No?
Sam, please don't comment unless it's needed.
It says. It's currently used by system.
I'm waiting for the fight to go down here.
It's gotta be at least 11. You just have a symbol and number. What was your guys?
Let's capture off.
No.
Yeah, no, I don't know. He has.
Sorry.
He
even clicking this doesn't.
Maybe Jeremy.
Okay.
Where am I getting these numbers?
Yeah, because like sometimes it doesn't show up. Even though it's connected to the base.
So three.
And then it's funny, remember getting my other truck when you No, like really? I go to the middle compartment. Oh, you're like, huh? What's that?
Like, really? What's this then?
You just extended this to say.
I really haven't been there for a while.
Like nothing. to worry about.
I don't even look at
Bro, it doesn't like
it.
That's what we call ouch. I think he's alone because he wants to.
That's not busy already. Or is there a gash?
I think he wants me to
I don't know.
He sent that exact.
Someone who got
It's one of my buddies on the I'm like, I think he's
Just send this your bank.
some
Do you want this?
like somebody to say hi. I guess I can get him.
Yes, it does. That looks good.
The smaller. Wow.
Okay, so we created the file systems. The last thing we need to do here is we need to create the swap space. Okay, so we need to do MK swap to make the swap space, and we need to specify where we want that swap space made. We want it on /dev/SDA2. Okay, so that's going to create the swap space for us. We should get a message like this indicating the swap space was created. If we want to activate that swap space now, we can. We don't necessarily need it. We can do a swap on /dev/SDA2 in order to activate it. And that's not necessary right now. All right. So here I'm going to make a recommendation. Okay, there are going to be a number of, if we somehow mess up somewhere during the creation process of building our Gentoo system, there are a number of commands that if we have to reboot and get back into it, okay, there are a number of commands that we're going to need to execute in order to gain access to the system and get our environment set up so that we can be modifying the instance on disk, not the one running in memory. Okay, so these next set of commands are the start of getting that stuff set up. So what I have done on my Linux Mint system is I have copied and created a file with those commands in it so that I can cut and paste them into my other session. Okay, these are the commands here. We're going to go through all of these commands here in the next couple of minutes. It's up to you, but if you wanted to create a file like this so that you could cut and paste all of these into the other window, that might save you some time if you have to reboot and get back into your system. All of these commands, by the way, are located in here, and we're going to be cutting and pasting them into our Gentoo system. Okay, so if you have a file open and when you cut and paste them, you just paste them twice, one into your file and one into your Gentoo system as we go along. Okay, that might save you some time.
I'm gonna need those commands that you just did for the swap space. Like, and I'm also, does it reset the root password on every reboot?
So are you able to create a file system?
I have, right, yeah, or no, that's what I'm trying to do.
Okay. JFS.ext4 /dev/SDA. Try to put this in three. So go back into that.
I think we're gonna go over those commands, but I'm trying to create a new file that has all those commands in.
I just.
I just copied those. I never got.
You showed me that.
That's what the Marines do. I'm in the air, that's like.
There are Air Force people when they create on.
That's the Marines. And the Air Force, we sit on that.
You're either a desk jockey or a button pusher or scientist.
I'm gonna be.
So you're a chair.
Try SSH from your last session.
And the cord.
And you're gonna have to go through a recreate.
No, that's cord unplugged, Jeremy. That's.
Okay, does anybody else have a question?
I'm gonna.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
So that you should.
Yeah.
I keep swear to push it.
My parents do
Or
say-
What system are you on here?
I don't want you to come up all together. They get
Oh, so you're not gonna have this Gentoo mounts.sh? You're not gonna have that file. Okay. That's a file that I created. That's what I was just telling you. You good?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so. Okay, mounting the root partition. This is the first of these commands that we want to execute. So over here on our Gentoo system.
We have to push that since we're just going to
Tell you what, let me reshare my screen. So it just got that portion of it.
Oh, sorry. I got this snapshots.
I can't SSH, I don't mix it either.
You're just like.
It says host key verification failed.
It's random. Sometimes it takes longer.
Okay, does it give you a way to clear it? It should give you a command.
Yes.
But there, so it has to keep that. Okay, so the first command that we need to execute here is we need to mount slash dev slash SDA3 on slash mount slash Gentoo. Okay, so what are we doing here? SDA3 we designated as our root partition, right? Our root file system. So this is supposed to be the root of our new Gentoo system. And here we are mounting it on MNT Gentoo. Okay, remember when we mount something under Unix, we have one directory tree, okay, one huge file structure. And when we mount something, it appears, okay, within that overall directory structure. So this location here is going to be the new root of our file system. Okay, so once we get into here, then we're going to be creating a new Linux structure, okay, from there on down. Okay, so keep that in mind as we get there. So let's go ahead and mount this. Okay, and then in our directions here, we'll pop this over here. We want to move over to the installing stage 3. Yes, Robert.
I got raw FS type data on
Website's down.
Website's down on that section.
there you
No. School.
We got the website.
Okay. Well, we got a couple of minutes, I guess, until it comes back up.
It's definitely not their account.
Mount.
We killed.
Yeah.
Slash data.
Yeah.
Slash
I was
SD.
about to have it feel like it's very almost the other screen, it's like
Space. Slash
Okay,
MNT.
create the file systems on it.
MNT.
Okay, well, then I'll do
Slash
like.
Gentoo. Slash Gentoo.
Okay, I just wrote over the plan straight across.
Yeah.
Okay, do you have the? So right up here. So we can do it on this one right here. You need to do that same thing for SD. Sorry, that's not what I did. That part's right. The extra code, oh, that's what SDA code. Yeah, so that's correct. For SDA three, we also need to do it for SDA one. No, not this one. Yeah, that's gonna be one.
When did this come in? 39 minutes ago or time? London time.
Computers trying to buy one of
Yes. Those sorts fairly exist.
So now you have to come up with an idea.
Don't worry. You know, I tried it for like 8 hours turns. So you start to turn the ball out.
How is everything else down to the T?
Or it's just a bunch of yeah, that was just all.
Oh, yeah, I can see this. Like, it's pretty cool.
I would think about it, honestly, for the 8 hours.
It really did.
I took a snapshot right before I turned it on.
Yes.
So I tried to revert back to that.
Yes.
Is it just for yeah.
And what?
What's the point of it?
What's it for? Is it like Linux, Windows?
No, it's not in Linux, bro. It's just like. People pay like thousands of dollars or millions of dollars just for it.
Because of the encryption and like sometimes the text tells who is it related to, who is the creator of that.
I'm looking for like exactly those commands he's talking about.
I remember saying something.
So either you. Two of them.
Or one of these guys. Ignore. Yep. We're celebrating big. Well, not tonight. Friday. Dude, you won't tell me. You know, it takes snapshots of everybody. You gotta ask you. I mean, if you want to come, you can also.
No, I'm good.
No, I'm good. It's like, no, that's not my business.
You got a girlfriend or something. It's gonna be some stupid.
He lost his virginity.
Now he wants to sell it.
He lost his virginity.
Probably, that's honestly probably.
Honestly, probably.
I mean, a high school.
High school.
Oh my God. Oh, God.
Just say that.
Of all the things to say, do not say that again.
Just say freshman and we'll just assume.
Ew.
Can we just assume college?
Can we just assume, can we all just collectively assume that that did not happen?
No doubt.
You're dreaming. I didn't hear anything.
No, I'm not gonna
What
confirm
happened?
tonight.
I don't know. Wow. Hey,
But if he gets arrested, you'll know.
if he gets arrested, that's the big if though.
It's not a matter of it, it's a matter of.
I don't know, I think it's a big matter. Your mom.
Damn.
Get wrecked.
Justin doesn't even know.
Damn, okay.
Looks like I'm hitting up fucking cross.
Rob.
How does Rob?
He was over.
I was literally about to go in and just.
I mean, Rob won't tell you.
I know Rob's not gonna tell me. He's not. He's like, no, you
That's
gotta have your Turo. I was like,
Tell your mom now.
I'll get Tristan now.
no, he won't even tell Tristan.
Really?
Yeah, that's how serious this whole thing is.
I'm going to swap the virginity.
Like, I'm calling it. Him and he can just one that he likes. That's here.
Like,
I swear
I
to
don't
me.
like this.
That's probably what happened.
That's probably what happened.
I don't like what's going on
You're
here.
gonna have to find out from them.
See, this is why you guys know, that's what happened. I'm not even asking. I'm just gonna assume that's exactly what happened. Just got a girlfriend. And it works out.
Honestly,
That's what I'm calling. It's kind of weird that he's celebrating his
That's
boys.
50% off.
Yeah.
no, it's like one of those like bachelor parties and shit like that. Basically, it's happening because he wears smart lights.
Yeah.
So he either got hit or
I don't give a shit. Serious.
and he's treating all the
Yeah, so we can sort of take to
No.
I don't know. Yeah, that's actually.
Unless we were making, he actually got like, he got a job. But I feel
Yeah, but
like,
why would you celebrate? Like that? Okay, I understand that's a job. Oh yeah, I got my first job. I like, you want to celebrate, but like, I want to see like.
he seems like one that go.
No, not even, no, he's not really defending. You have friends over here.
In this one, he can go.
Okay, yeah, but like, I don't think you'd go this far if it was a job.
I do.
I still think, no.
I don't take it to any of their.
I still think it was,
pages.
I still think it's like.
I'm gonna say I break everybody.
He creamed the pie.
That is Espanol. No.
Don't be
Inside is broken. Yeah.
Well, it's big for him. So I'm gonna say.
That's not
Dude, it's
Nah, we're gonna be there.
Is it down?
Nah, you're gonna book.
What's inside? What's inside?
That's just me off the Wayback Machine. I don't think.
I've seen that.
Gentoo is down for everyone.
You're telling
It's good, but Alex is never there.
Oh, it's got.
Well, actually. Yeah.
He's never been to meet us.
Some people have shit up in like.
Well, I mean, if it responds back, like that.
Probably, yeah.
You seem like people online where they dress up. So like.
Yeah.
But then is it down right now?
Yeah, that's what they're doing. I mean,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've seen that.
Down.
No, that's a different story. That's a different story.
One fifteen and that great. So I'm sure they're okay with it.
Sounds like a.
They're good, but I wouldn't say they're like.
Okay.
Yeah, like, I mean, I think they're like an actual bar. Back home, like, I can actually go to a bar.
It's you, they said. It looks like.
Here, probably one of the better ones. I mean,
I wouldn't say that, Brad.
yeah, I wouldn't too bad.
The Gentoo top, but the Gentoo site is not. Maybe so see that.
But
Their official ones.
Yeah, they're on.
They're showing like.
Their bouncer is unknown. Package databases is anything.
Well, I have to like delete the video, restart the whole thing. So like,
It's
so when I do the lid, I think he's like. So I have to delete it. It's still not.
I have a handful pulled up, so.
We should have exported the PDF.
Let's get it.
Okay. Yeah, we're experiencing technical difficulties.
Yeah. Tomorrow?
All right,
This is why it's gonna take a little bit.
I get it now. I get it now. All right, let's all try not to slam the website next time. That's
Everybody refresh at the same time.
Ready, set, 3, 2, 1. Broken.
It's equivalent to a DDoS if we all keep doing multiple tabs all at the same time.
I would think that they would have more robust servers. I mean, handling more than 20 people.
command is my file?
Yes.
Expect anybody got it.
I don't know, but I would expect them to have more than 20 people on a concurrent connection.
/dev/
It's all from the same IP, but they just blocked this.
Block that.
If it would be. Turn it off.
They said we swear.
Shut it off for the month that EDS.
Okay, I think we're gonna call it a day here. Okay, so, in order for us to pick up right where we are tomorrow, okay, let's pause, everybody pause your Linux Mint machine and pause your Gentoo system.
Okay, Matt, suspend your machine.
Okay, suspend both of those. We should be able to bring them right back at the beginning of class tomorrow, and hopefully this website will be back up and we'll be able to go from here. Okay, let's call it a day.
I'm all legitimate.
No, pause or this guy do the same thing. They do the same. His is in my, in the state of mind's dummy.
What'd you do about it?
Am I gonna do that? Am I-